It's not only in the US and UK that border protection is on the ballot. Yes, the European Parliament's vote on a migration pact was always going to be close, especially 2 months out from EU elections. We'll ask about its passage and about burden sharing. This as the numbers of those crossing the Mediterranean hit their highest since 2015 last year. Too much or too little in this overhaul? What goes for migration policy goes for the EU as a whole. After all, protecting so-called Fortress Europe is Brussels' prerogative, while immigration policy, deciding what foreign labor is needed for an aging continent, well, that's up for member states. What is the way forward? Today in the France 24 debate, we are asking in the wake of this passage by the European Parliament. We'll be joined shortly from Brussels by a member of the European Parliament, Sandro Gozzi of the Renew Europe bloc. Carmine Conte is Senior Legal Policy Analyst at the Migration Policy Group think tank. Thanks for being with us. Also joining us is France 24 correspondent Dave Keating, who is in Brussels. Your reactions on the hashtag F24debate. Dave, it was
very hard to find a common solution.
Dave Keating there setting up. Can you hear us, Dave?
Yes, I can.
It was a close vote, not as close as some expected.
Exactly, yes. So this was closely watched because the expectation was that there could be a combination of a vote from the far left and the far right to defeat this. And the far left and the far right did mostly vote against this, but they also were watching some breakaway defectors from the main centrist groups, the center left, the center right, the liberals. A lot of it was caught up in national politics. So in some countries, if the person in charge of the country was for this pact, then the opposition parties wanted to be against it to demonstrate some kind of difference. In the end, all 10 elements of this package did pass. So this is now going to become law because the national governments already came to an agreement on this. The parliament voting against this today would have thrown a spanner in the works, would have all of a sudden undone basically that deal that member states had agreed. But this will become law. It's going to be approved in a final rubber stamp later this month by member states, and then it will be the law of the land.
Let's take a look at that law, Migration and Asylum Pact, that was, well, inspired by the record wave of migrants in 2015, had been on the drawing board since 2020, and is passed in 2024, just ahead of those European elections. Karis Garland tells us what's in it.
When she first presented the bill in September 2020, the European Commission chief called it a pragmatic and reasonable approach. But the new pact on migration and asylum has been slammed by rights groups and politicians across the spectrum. It includes several interlinked pieces of legislation, including compulsory initial screening at EU borders that would last up to 7 days. Afterwards, migrants would be directed towards a standard or an accelerated asylum procedure or sent back to their country of origin or transit. Migrants whose asylum request is deemed valid but statistically have the least chance of obtaining international protection would be directed towards a, quote, border procedure. This concerns nationals of countries like Morocco, Tunisia and Bangladesh. Their claims would be dealt with in a maximum of 12 weeks, and if rejected, they should be returned to their home countries within a further 12 weeks. The new bill maintains the principle whereby the first EU country an asylum seeker enters is responsible for examining their case, but to relieve pressure on southern Europe, where most migrants arrive, a so-called solidarity mechanism would oblige other member states to either take in asylum seekers or give other countries financial aid. They'd pay €20,000 for each asylum seeker not relocated. The legislation also includes an emergency response mechanism if the bloc faces a surge in migration like that of 2015 to 2016. Under this provision, migrants would be detained at the EU's external borders for up to 9 months instead of 6. The pact has been criticised by rights groups and the left as focusing on keeping people away rather than helping those in need. while members of the far right want more measures to fortify the bloc's outer borders.
Carmine Conte, was this a needed overhaul?
Sorry, I didn't hear you properly.
This has been so long in the making? Was this a needed overhaul?
I mean, Europe needs a reform of the European asylum and migration system, but the pact that has been approved today really represents a lost historical opportunity for the EU to uphold its human rights and its values. Because this pact goes in the direction of externalizing migration policy and undermining the fundamental rights of migrants.
Externalizing it how?
There are several issues, controversial issues under the new pact that has been mentioned before. First of all, there will be fast-track asylum and return procedures, meaning that there will be substandard procedures when it comes to processing asylum application, with lower safeguards, with no access to legal advices and inadequate assessment of vulnerability of the migrants. And also migrants will be screened at the borders, and they can risk of being detained in facilities up to 12 weeks. And in case their application is rejected, the detention can be extended for further 12 weeks. This means that we will see an increased resort to detention towards asylum seekers and migrants at the external border of Europe.
Will that concretely change anything when you look at a country like Greece, where migrants are already parked in camps?
That can make the situation even worse. Europe should stop pushback and should really promote the right of asylum of migrants. So this goes completely in the opposite direction. Could risk increase pushback at the external borders.
Dave Keating, reactions coming in. Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz saying that this was historic and indispensable. But I'm seeing that Poland's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, says his country flat out will not be accepting the immigration relocation mechanism that's in the bill. That is, you either take in some of the migrants or you pay not to.
Yeah, this is the same problem that happened the last time that they tried to reach an agreement on this several years ago. Poland and Hungary basically just refused to participate in this relocation scheme. And so that's why it was felt that this time over they had to get, or they should aspire to get, unanimous approval in the council, because basically Poland and Hungary were outvoted. And so they said, well, we're just not going to do it. There had been hopes with the government change in Poland. So we had the far-right Law and Justice Party in power before. Now we have the center-right coalition led by Donald Tusk. There were hopes that they would be more constructive here. I think there was some disappointment that the new Donald Tusk government didn't substantially change the position of the previous government, which is that they don't think Poland should be forced to take in any of the asylum, people who have been granted asylum at those frontline countries on the Mediterranean. But that being said, there is this mechanism now where they can pay those frontline countries, Italy, Greece, they can pay for border management rather than take in those asylum, those people who have been granted asylum. It's unclear right now whether whether the government is saying that we won't take in any asylum receivers. That's probably important for a domestic political audience to say that. But are they also saying they won't pay? That's what's unclear at the current moment. From the Hungarian government, we can expect they will refuse to do both.
Refuse to do both. Carmine Conte, something has to be done. I mean, we've seen in 2023 the number of illegal crossings at its highest since 2015. And for the sole month of January this year, there were more migrants who reached Spain's Canary Islands from Africa than in the first 6 months of the previous years. I mean, this fear of a pull factor is important. What do you suggest in the face of that?
That's exactly the main issue here. Europe needs equal responsibility, shared responsibility among all the member states when it comes to assess asylum application. Instead, the current pact that has been approved today doesn't change the rule of the first country of entry that is responsible for processing asylum application. The pact confirms these rules and keep the pressure on the member states that are at the border of Europe, exactly like Italy, Spain, and Greece. The pact introduced only a solidarity mechanism according to which other member states can help the member states under pressure by taking some migrants through some relocation mechanism or just providing financial support to the member states that are under pressure. But we don't know how this money will be used. This money can be used for building more detention center or for keep controlling the border. So the new mechanism introduced by the pact doesn't really solve the main issue at stake in the European Union.
Sandro Gozzi joins us now as promised from Brussels, member of the European Parliament from the Renew Europe group. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Your reaction to the passage of this overhaul of migration and asylum rules across the EU?
It is a very good decision. And I can tell you that if I had got this asylum migration pact, where I was a minister in Italy during the 2014-2015 crisis, I would have got certainly more instruments, more tools to take back control on migration. Of course, it is not the perfect solution. In this kind of issue, there cannot be a perfect solution, but it is a very important step ahead for three main reasons. The first reason that we really increase the efficiency of the border management, of the border control, and we streamline the asylum procedure. And to streamline the asylum procedure is also very important because there are too many differences in the EU asylum procedure among the different member states, and this is not efficient. Second, we finally decide that the solidarity mechanisms are mandatory. As a compromise, the mandatory solidarity can be relocalization of asylum seekers. That means asylum seekers who arrive in Canary Island or in Lampedusa, they are relocated during the asylum procedure among different member states, or can be providing financial help. But this is also very important because we didn't have it at all. And then there is also a stronger tools to work on returns, or returns to those who are not entitled to stay on the European Union territory. I think that these three elements are key elements, and I think that it is clear. As I was listening to, I agree with what you were saying in the studio. Now let's implement it properly. How the financial solidarity mechanism will be used. How we will implement in the full respect of European law and fundamental freedoms, the rules concerning the minors. This is a very sensitive point on which we have to pay the highest attention. But all in all, it's certainly a very good, very positive step ahead.
Yeah, because the problem with underage arrivals is that they're going to wind up in detention centers.
Yes, for a certain period of time, in the full respect of their fundamental rights. Certainly, this is a sensitive but necessary point on which we will have to pay the highest attention on the implementation part. I absolutely say it. I mean, I'm convinced that this point was a necessary part of the deal. We have to consider that we needed to gather a wide majority in the House, and this is a point on which the right European People's Party was insisting particularly. It was also an important point for some member states in the Council. Now the devil in the detail, and certainly it is a sensitive point on which we will have to oversee and we will oversee as member of the European Parliament, but certainly also for the minors protection to accelerate and to make the EU asylum procedure more efficient is certainly a good progress also in terms of treating the demand and respecting the asylum seeker rights.
Where to keep asylum seekers when they are having their applications processed. There are schemes to pay third countries to take in asylum request applicants. Ahead of UK elections, the ruling Conservatives still standing by their plan to deport illegal arrivals to Rwanda. Here you see the country's President Paul Kagame welcomed this week by Rishi Sunak to Downing Street. Albania, closer to the European Union, building 2 detention centers at a former military base, and it's Italy that will be paying for it and will be policing those centers. Sandro Gozzi, your thoughts on that, on having Albania effectively take in asylum seeker requests. Is this like what the UK is trying to do with Rwanda?
No, Giorgia Meloni she's a dealer of demagogy. She's dealing, she's sort of political leader of demagogy. This agreement with Albania is a purely electoralistic agreement. She wants to make believe to the Italian voter that she solved the problem by delegating it to Edi Rama, who is very shrewd. Albania is a candidate to the European Union. You want to strengthen the alliance with Italy, but it is absolute, in my view, it is in clear contradiction of the Asylum and Migration Pact. So it is clear that Giorgia Meloni in its demagogical.
This is sort of a side deal. Is that also in contradiction when she and the Dutch Prime Minister and Ursula von der Leyen went to strike a deal with Tunisia's strongman?
In my view, the Rwanda model, which has been replicated in the Albania model, because the two models, they delegate a part of the procedure to third country. I mean, Meloni is delegating to Edi Rama, Italy is delegating to Albania.
But is it the same when it deals with Tunisia and Egypt?
No, it's not the same, because we can criticize the approach with Tunisia or with Egypt, and I have criticized it, but there you cooperate to tackle the traffic of human beings and to dismantle the network of the traffic of human beings. In the case of Albania, Italy would like to delegate a part of the asylum procedure to the Albanians. And this is my view, it is in clear contradiction, in my view also legal contradiction, with the pact, with the Asylum and Migration Pact that we've just adopted. Why? Because in the new Asylum Migration Pact, we clearly say that the screening procedure, the procedure concerning the asylum seeker when they arrive on EU territory, must be dealt fully on the EU territory. So this is why I'm saying that a deal, an agreement between Italy and Albania, through which Italy delegates to Albania a part of this screening procedure, a part of this asylum procedure, in my view, it is in legal violation of the pact. It is clear that it is in blatant political contradiction with the Asylum and Migration Pact.
Carmen Conte, do you agree?
The European Commission is not acting. Maybe because Ursula von der Leyen might need the Giorgia Meloni support to be re-elected, the more she goes along this way, the less Ursula von der Leyen will have our support.
Carmen Conte, you agree?
On this specific issue, I agree with the previous speakers, because externalizing migration policies is never a good idea, and the deal done by Italy with Albania is one of the most recent examples of this externalization of asylum and migration policies that somehow follow the lines of other agreements that have been done in the past with other countries like Tunisia, with Turkey, but this is still part of an overall program that is an overall approach that still has been also used by the European Union in the past. And of course, delegating the asylum application process to another country, to a third country, means that this will be detrimental for the rights of migrants. That, of course, in that country there will be no obligation to comply with the highest standard of European law on asylum and migration.
Dave Keating, we know about the left's objections. What about the far right? Because Giorgia Meloni yourself in favor of this pact. There are divisions there, it seems.
I think the division was between far-right parties in power and far-right parties out of power. So, of course, Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy were supportive of this. This was very, very much a project of Meloni's in the council. But then we had the far-right from France, from Germany, from all kinds of countries opposing this. Basically, you had the far left saying this was too cruel, too harsh on incoming migrants, and then you had the far right saying it wasn't harsh enough and that this amounted to make it easier for migrants to come in. I think that assertion is patently nonsense. I mean, the pact very, very clearly, it sets out the intention to make it more difficult to apply for asylum if you don't have the right to asylum. And in theory, it should make it easier to process the asylum applications quickly, and for those people who don't have the right to asylum, for them to be sent back. However, I think in the upcoming election campaign, both the EU election and upcoming national campaigns, the far right is going to present this to people as a way of speeding up people coming into the Union. The question is whether that works. Just asked at the press conference that was held just about 30 minutes ago by the European Parliament head, Roberta Metsola, she was asked at that press conference whether the far right is going to use this pact in the election to say the EU is getting soft on migrants. And she said, no, I believe it would have been the opposite if we were unable to pass this, if we failed yet again to pass asylum and migration policy reform, then we would have been vulnerable to the far right. That's certainly what the EPP, her center-right group, has been thinking. I think the big question is just who's going to win the narrative war here. It would be very easy in a lack of public information situation for the far right to present this pact as actually something that's made it easier to come into the EU claiming asylum, when in fact the opposite is true.
And Dave, we know that Europe's going to need more people coming in. The latest official statistics show the bloc's population is flatlining and it's aging. In 2 decades, the proportion of those aged 80 or above in the European Union has doubled to more than 6%. There you see the graph. So we're having a discussion, as always, about migration. Should it be coupled with a discussion about immigration?
Yeah, that has been a big criticism of this whole discussion, that it's focused so much on illegal or irregular migration and not actually focused on making it easier for people to have legal routes to come into Europe to fill low-skilled jobs. That is, all economists say, absolutely necessary for Europe, particularly for those frontline countries and particularly for Italy, which has a major, major demographic challenge on its hands. However, all the talk, all the political talk, is about keeping people out. And that seems to be the type of political talk that gives you political rewards. And so when at this closing press conference here, you had the politicians saying the European citizens wanted this and we are giving them what they have wanted to make a more orderly migration system. That might be the case for this specific question of asylum, but where is the accompanying immigration reform that would make it more logical and streamlined for low-skilled workers to be able to come into the EU legally? We, of course, have the blue card system in the EU. That's the equivalent of the US green card system that allows someone, a highly skilled, highly educated person, to travel across the union and work wherever they like. There is no equivalent for a low-skilled worker, and no one's ever even talked about doing that as far as I'm aware. So clearly one side of this equation is being ignored.
And I wish we could have more time to get the feedback from the rest of our panel, but unfortunately, that's it for now. This is a topic we'll revisit, of course. I want to thank you so much, Dave Keating in Brussels. I want to thank Sandro Gozzi and Carmine Conte for taking part as well in this discussion. Thanks for being with us for this abridged edition of the France 24 debate.